When it comes to the world wars, it's the bigger one, the second one, that gets the most attention. Most people at least know the basics of how the war started, and some important milestones, such as D-Day, Pearl Harbor, and even more horrifically, the Holocaust. But what about the First World War? How did it start? Who was involved? And ultimately, how did it end? That's the question we will be answering in this week's Historical History documentary. By the way, I upload a new documentary every Friday, so if you like this content, please thumbs up the video and subscribe so you don't miss out. By the early 20th century, Europe was a powder keg of competing powers, bound together in a tight web of alliances that were meant to deter war, but instead made a continent-wide conflict almost inevitable. The European alliances break down into two groups: the Triple Entente, which included France, Russia, and Britain, and the Triple Alliance, formed by Germany, Austria-Hungary, and later Italy. For centuries, Britain and France had been rivals, clashing in global conflicts from the Napoleonic Wars to colonial skirmishes in Africa and Asia. By the late 19th century, colonial competition had led to several crises, including the Fashoda Incident, 1898, where French and British forces nearly went to war in Sudan over territorial claims. France ultimately backed down, revealing its relative weakness and isolation. Tensions over Egypt and Morocco didn't help either, where both nations had overlapping interests. But the rise of a new threat, Imperial Germany, began to overshadow old hostilities. In 1904, the world shifted quietly but decisively. Two ancient enemies, France and Britain, buried centuries of rivalry, not out of affection, but out of necessity. An agreement was made by both countries called the Entente Cordiale. This document didn't bind Britain and France to war, but it ensured that if Europe caught fire, they would be standing on the same side of the line. Essentially, as Germany started to expand its power, the Entente Cordiale marked a historic reversal of centuries of antagonism. It wasn't aimed explicitly at Germany, but Berlin saw it as an anti-German move. Germany tested the Entente in 1905, triggering the First Moroccan Crisis by challenging French control of Morocco. The result? Britain backed France, and Germany found itself diplomatically isolated. After the Entente Cordiale, military and naval discussions between Britain and France began informally. It laid the diplomatic foundation for what would become the Triple Entente with the addition of Russia in 1907. In the years before World War I, British and French military staff coordinated plans in case of war with Germany, despite no formal treaty requiring them to fight together. All right, that makes sense. But why all the fear of Germany? Were the concerns legit? Or did France and Britain decide just to be dicks? The fear that France and Britain developed toward Imperial Germany wasn't based on one single factor, but on a convergence of military, economic, diplomatic, and psychological developments that made Germany seem like a looming threat to the European balance of power. By the early 1900s, Germany had the largest and most modern land army in Europe. Its industrial output surpassed Britain and France, especially in coal, steel, and chemicals. This growth felt threatening, especially as Germany lacked the colonies to match its economic power, suggesting it might seek expansion elsewhere. Germany adopted a bold, confrontational foreign policy to assert itself as a world power. This included challenging France in Morocco in 1905 and 1911, backing Austria-Hungary against Serbia and Russia, and taking an increasingly bellicose tone in diplomacy, often seen as reckless or arrogant. Under Kaiser Wilhelm II, Germany began building a powerful modern navy, especially dreadnought-class battleships. This challenged British naval supremacy, which had been unchallenged for over a century. Britain responded with a massive naval buildup, leading to an arms race that strained relations. British fears were compounded by the belief in the two-power standard. The Royal Navy had to be stronger than the next two navies combined. France still smarted from its humiliating defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. Because of this, France viewed Germany as a constant threat of invasion and dreamed of revenge and recovery, revanchisme. German military planning, especially the Schlieffen Plan, which involved invading France via Belgium, reinforced these fears. With tensions high on all sides, it was only a matter of time before a catalyst triggered devastating results. Franz Ferdinand was heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne and nephew of Emperor Franz Joseph. He was not beloved by all within the empire. His marriage to a commoner, Sophie Chotek, made him a controversial figure. Politically, he was more moderate than many Austrian elites and even supported giving Slavic peoples more autonomy. Ironically, this made him a threat to Serbian nationalists who wanted independence from Austria-Hungary. On June 28, 1914, Franz Ferdinand visited Sarajevo to observe military exercises and review troops, a provocative act since Bosnia had only recently been annexed by Austria-Hungary in 1908, angering Serbs who considered it Slavic land. A secret Serbian nationalist group called the Black Hand saw the Archduke as an obstacle to their goal, a greater Serbia that would unify all South Slavs. Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb, was one of 7 conspirators sent to assassinate him. They smuggled weapons into Bosnia and positioned themselves along the Archduke's motorcade route in Sarajevo. The first attacker threw a grenade, but it bounced off the car and exploded under a following vehicle, injuring bystanders and soldiers. The Archduke continued on to his planned event, giving a speech, visibly shaken. Meanwhile, Princip and the others believed the mission had failed. After the official event, Franz Ferdinand insisted on visiting the wounded from the bombing. Due to a mix-up in the motorcade's route, his driver took a wrong turn and stopped the car right in front of Gavrilo Princip, who was standing outside a cafe. Princip took out his pistol and fired 2 shots. One hit Sophie in the abdomen. The other hit Franz Ferdinand in the neck. Both died within minutes. The assassination caused outrage in Vienna. Though Princip was a Bosnian subject of the empire, evidence linked the plot back to Serbia. The weapons came from Serbian military stock, and members of the Black Hand included Serbian military officers. Austria-Hungary had been looking for an excuse to crush Serbia, which it saw as a destabilizing force in the Balkans. This was the start of what is now called the July Crisis. Austria feared Russia might intervene if it attacked Serbia, so it turned to Germany, its ally. On July 5, 1914, Kaiser Wilhelm II and his advisors offered a blank check, unconditional support, even if that meant war with Russia. This emboldened Austria to act aggressively. On July 23, Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia with 10 harsh demands, including allowing Austrian officials to operate inside Serbia to investigate the plot. Serbia accepted most, but not all, of the demands. Austria deemed the response insufficient and declared war on Serbia on July 28th, exactly 1 month after the assassination. They started bombing Belgrade the next day. It was the first declaration of war in Europe in over 40 years. The domino effect was already well underway. So, what happened next? Russia saw itself as the protector of the Slavic peoples, especially fellow Orthodox Christians like the Serbs. It began partial, then full mobilization to defend Serbia. Russia's mobilization alarmed Germany. Mobilization was seen as a direct threat, not just a precaution. Germany had a war plan ready for this exact scenario, the Schlieffen Plan, which called for quickly defeating France before turning to fight Russia. Knowing that Russian mobilization could not be reversed easily, Germany declared war on Russia on August 1st. The German military command insisted it was now or never. France, bound to Russia by treaty, mobilized in support. Germany demanded French neutrality. France refused. On August 3rd, Germany declared war on France. The key to the Schlieffen Plan was a rapid German advance through neutral Belgium to encircle Paris. Belgium refused German demands to allow passage. Well, Germany wasn't having any of that jazz and invaded Belgium on August 4th, violating its neutrality. Britain had guaranteed Belgian neutrality in the 1839 Treaty of London. Britain issued an ultimatum to Germany to withdraw. When it was ignored, Britain declared war on Germany on the night of August 4th. Due to imperial ties and colonial empires, the war quickly spread beyond Europe. Japan entered on the side of the Allies on August 23rd, seizing German colonies in Asia. Austria-Hungary declared war on Russia August 6th. France and Britain drew on their empires. Indian troops, African soldiers, Canadians, Australians, and others would soon be fighting in Europe. Whew, all right, let's digest all that for a moment. Lots of conflict and miscommunication going on here. A complicated situation tied in alliances and mistrust. This is what we in the history game call a clusterfuck. What began as a regional crisis in the Balkans unraveled into the largest war the world had ever seen, because every power, convinced it was acting in self-defense, reached for the sword. One by one, the nations of Europe fell like dominoes. The guns of August were loaded in July. Let's take a closer look at Germany and the military's philosophy during the war. The Schlieffen Plan, developed by Count Alfred von Schlieffen, chief of the German General Staff, was based on the assumption that Germany would face a two-front war, France in the west, Russia in the east. The plan's key logic: Russia would take weeks to fully mobilize, while France could strike quickly. So Germany should defeat France first, then turn east. Germany invaded Belgium on August 4, 1914, violating its neutrality. The goal? Sweep through Belgium and northern France, then encircle Paris from the west. It depended on speed, precise timing, and minimal resistance from Belgium and Britain. It failed because Belgian resistance was stronger than expected. The fortresses at Liège and Namur held up the German advance. Britain sent the BEF, British Expeditionary Force, quickly to reinforce the French. The French military, though battered, did not collapse. Most critically, Germany underestimated Russia, which mobilized faster than expected and invaded East Prussia, forcing Germany to divert troops east. The Schlieffen Plan's failure led to a stalemate on the Western Front. Germany was now fighting a two-front war, exactly what it had tried to avoid. In the Battle of the Frontiers, occurring in August 1914, France launched an offensive into Alsace-Lorraine, hoping to reclaim lost territory. This resulted in disastrous French losses, poor coordination, and retreat. During the German advance through Belgium, German forces crushed Belgian resistance, but at a high cost. German troops committed atrocities against civilians in towns like Louvain and Dinant, known as the Rape of Belgium, which turned public opinion in neutral countries against Germany. During the Battle of Mons, which occurred August 23rd, the first major engagement of the British Expeditionary Force took place. Though outnumbered, the BEF held off the Germans briefly before retreating. The professionalism of the British soldiers surprised the Germans, who had called them a contemptible little army. During what is called the Miracle of the Marne, occurring in early September, as Germans closed in on Paris, the French and British counterattacked at the Marne River, using taxis to ferry troops to the front, a legendary moment in French history. The Allies halted the German advance. The result? German retreat, leading to a new kind of warfare, entrenchment. The war's opening battles were bloody, fast, and full of movement, until the front lines froze in place. By winter, the dream of a quick war had drowned in blood and mud. In Paris, Berlin, Vienna, and London, crowds cheered in the streets. War was seen as heroic, inevitable, even cleansing, a test of national strength and unity. Poets, intellectuals, and artists joined the chorus. Even future pacifists initially celebrated. Young men rushed to enlist, fearing the war would be over before they could prove themselves. In many places, women handed out flowers to departing soldiers. Propaganda encouraged civilians to support the war effort with donations, knitting, and volunteering. There was little understanding of what modern industrial war would bring. While many cheered, not everyone was enthusiastic. Socialists and trade unionists were divided. Many supported national governments, but some, like in Russia and Germany, tried to resist. In Ireland, some nationalists opposed fighting for Britain. Some intellectuals, like Bertrand Russell, were deeply alarmed and opposed the war from the start. The war that was supposed to be over by Christmas dragged into a second year, then a third, then a fourth. Nations bled themselves dry across muddy fields and frozen forests. From the sands of the Middle East to the forests of the Argonne, the Great War carved its story into the face of the earth. In 1915, new horrors emerged. At Ypres, German forces unleashed a weapon once banned by civilization, chlorine gas. It rolled silently across no man's land, choking the air, burning the lungs, and changing warfare forever. Far to the south, the Allies tried to outflank the stalemate. At Gallipoli, they landed on Turkish shores, hoping to strike at the heart of the Ottoman Empire. Instead, they were pinned, trapped, and slaughtered. It was a bitter baptism for soldiers from Australia and New Zealand, a defeat that would help shape their national identities. 1916 became the year of annihilation. At Verdun, Germany sought to bleed France to death. The French held, repeating one phrase like a prayer: "They shall not pass." In 10 months of fighting, nearly 1 million men became casualties for a battle that changed little on the map. In 1917, revolution swept through the Russian Empire. The Tsar fell. Months later, the Bolsheviks seized power. Lenin promised peace, land, and bread, and delivered one of them. Russia signed a separate peace with Germany. The Eastern Front collapsed. Germany turned to unrestricted submarine warfare, sinking ships without warning, even civilian liners like the Lusitania. They gambled they could starve Britain into submission before America could react. But the gamble failed. The ship sank in just 18 minutes, killing 1,198 people, including 128 Americans. The attack shocked the world and turned U.S. public opinion sharply against Germany, though it would take 2 more years for America to enter the war. The sinking of the Lusitania is worthy of a documentary on its own, as there's a lot of controversy surrounding exactly what the British government knew and their intentions to get America into the war. Perhaps that's a subject we will revisit in the future. Anyway, in April 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. A new tide was turning. The old world would soon be flooded with New World soldiers. Desperate to end the war before America arrived in force, Germany launched the Spring Offensive in 1918. At first, they broke through. Paris was nearly within reach. But they had stretched too far too fast. Then came the 100 Days Offensive. Fresh American divisions, coordinated Allied assaults, tanks, planes, and artillery shattered German positions. The myth of German invincibility dissolved in fire. At home, revolution stirred. The Kaiser abdicated. The empire crumbled. And on November 11, 1918, the guns fell silent. The peace came not with healing, but with punishment. At Versailles, the Allies forced Germany to admit guilt, pay reparations, and surrender its colonies. The war was over, but its consequences had only begun. In November of 1918, the guns fell silent. Soldiers emerged from trenches not as heroes, but as ghosts. Empires crumbled, borders shifted, millions were dead. And yet, the world did not feel at peace. It felt hollowed. The treaties that followed drew new lines on old maps, but they didn't bind wounds. Instead, they sowed seeds of resentment, of nationalism, of revenge. From the mud of Flanders rose fascism in Germany, revolution in Russia, unrest in the Middle East. The war to end all wars was nothing of the sort. It was a beginning of a century defined by what came next. But amid the ruin, something else emerged. Memory. The memory of lives lost, of horror witnessed, of peace painfully earned. Quoting Sir Edward Grey in 1914, "The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime." World War I reshaped the human experience. Not just how wars were fought, but why. It was not just a tragedy, it was a turning point, one that still whispers to us, through monuments, through silence, through the lessons of history. The war is over, but its echoes remain. Thanks for watching. Do you have an idea for a future documentary? Maybe you have something to share that we missed. Be sure to sound off in the comments below. And if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, that would really help me out. See you next time.